We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast Backstage episode. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn, and welcome aboard. We always love this conversation.
And, you know, it's really exciting. We have a segment. If you're local to the 518 Capital District, listen to the end because we have a special surprise guest at the end talking about a wonderful way to promote local theater here. But speaking of local theater, holy cow, Benita, like everybody opened a show this last weekend. So many companies.
And Bob Gephardt, the longtime critic, was complaining, like, you guys ought to get together and make a schedule. And, on one hand, I don't disagree. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this slot is very hard because everyone's avoiding Thanksgiving. Everyone's avoiding the, Christmas holidays and everything that happens in December. So it's slim pickings on weekends this time of year.
Huge.
Yeah.
Right. And we opened, I want to give a shout out to the cast and crew and orchestra of Cabaret with the Two of Us Productions. And this past weekend, we've got one more weekend coming up. And what a nice audience was there opening night. And, we're taping this in advance of the rest of the weekend run. They've asked you proof of vaccination and mask.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't asked that question. So maybe that goes on the coming up one. How do you feel about that? There was an event just recently that I had been invited to attend the day of the opening of the show, and the vaccination proof was not required. Mask, yes. And the director said to me, I'd prefer you don't go.
Yeah, I saw a show that didn't require proof of vaccination. Masks, yes, but I was annoyed because the people in front of me took their masks off during the show. And
okay,
so
Ellen, I see our next question.
Yeah.
Do you pick and choose the shows you'll see based on requirements vis-a-vis vaccination and mask? And what happens if somebody unmasks?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Should we talk about that coming up?
Yeah. It's topical. It's not going away for a while.
Yeah, there have been a couple of shows that had to suspend.
Yeah.
In the community. But we had a lot of responses to this week.
We did, yes. And I'm so excited for this topic because I think you posed such a good question, Benita. So we were talking, this is the way we phrased the question based on our conversation from last Backstage episode. We said, Ben Platt playing a teenager in Dear Evan Hanson, Rachel Brosnahan playing a Jewish woman on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Jonathan Pryce playing the engineer in Miss Saigon. In your opinion, when is it acting? And when is it inappropriate for an actor to play a character that is a different age, religion, gender, race, sexual orientation, or ability?
And the gender has been very hot too. Sexual orientation, I should say, has also been a very hot issue.
Absolutely. Do you want to just jump into what some
Ryan said? Acting is acting. You find the actor or actress who best fits the part. That said, you should make every effort to keep all those things in mind. Some of them, things that are visible or seemingly perceptible, age, skin color, etc., are mostly no-brainers. I say mostly because there have been many amazing performances where shows with characters of predominantly one ethnicity are played by actors of another to incredibly powerful effect. As for characters with non-physical characteristics, it should always come back to who is the best performer for the job. I'm going to skip down because he had a wonderful, long, thoughtful answer. But finally, to the gender question, one of the best Hamlets I've ever seen and directed was a woman. There are times when gender flipped or simply role played by a member of another gender work extremely well, and these must be considered. And in our production of Cabaret, that's being played by a woman.
Mm.
The MC is being played by a woman, Constance Lopez, and we know that it was originally written for a man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, as our society is getting more gender fluid and understanding, I think, yeah, celebrate that on stage, you know?
So thank you very much, Ryan.
Carolyn says, when the playwright specifies it, like in Children of a Lesser God, it specifically says Sarah had to be played of an actress who is deaf. And I think, yeah, you have to honor the playwright's intentions there.
Yeah. Pick up Patrick, why don't you?
Yeah, Patrick says, I don't think you can include age with race and ethnicity as examples of inappropriate casting. It's not the same thing at all. You cannot buy Ben Platt as a teenager, but that's for you to give the movie a thumbs up or a thumbs down, as opposed to Jonathan Pryce playing an Asian role. Ben Platt and Dear Evan Hanson are not discriminating against and insulting 17-year-olds. Cameron McIntosh and Miss Saigon greatly offended Asians.
Yeah. And
Now,
that was,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that may have been the start of this conversation initially.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, anyone who knows me knows that Miss Saigon ranks in my top 3 musicals of all time. I love that show. I've listened to Jonathan Pryce sing on the soundtrack millions and millions of times. I love him. But yes, listening to interviews of him talking, and he's a fantastic actor. He's amazing. But listening to interviews of him talk about how they would, pull his eyes back to make him look more Asian. It's very uncomfortable. And yeah, even though I love his performance, I love, him as an actor, that's something that we really, I think, need to stop at. If it's something physically that you can tell an actor is not that ethnicity, then yeah, I don't understand why we would cast someone of a different ethnicity when it's specifically in the script supposed to be a certain way.
I think back to, I'm trying to think the name of the movie. Jennifer Jones was the actress, a Caucasian woman who played an Asian woman. A World War II movie. Someone's going to go, oh, come on, Benita, it was. And it was a love story in there. But again, that was at a time when casting was only white.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the actor was specifically African American.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of Gone with the Wind.
Mm-hmm.
But we have come so far to understanding and being respectful.
Yeah.
Since then, Lita writes, this is always a hot topic, and I can at least chime in on some aspects, and I'm torn on some of these. I'll start with the teen one. I think it definitely paints an unrealistic image of how a teen should look in high school. Middle school and high school students are already very self-conscious about their look, so having older actors portraying high schoolers is only feeding into that insecurity. I know it's definitely been a problem with other films in past, especially with 30-year-olds playing high school girls, Mean Girls, for example. I'm sure there are plenty of younger actors out there that are incredibly talented and are waiting for a breakout role. Now the tricky one. Maisel is a pretty satirical show in its approach, but it does offer a glimpse into some aspects of a Jewish family and has a heart to it. I'm a part of a reform synagogue here in Albany, and I also teach some drama activities at the Sunday school and do puppetry for some of the holidays. I'm not Jewish, but my husband is. At the temple, there are lots of families that are interfaith and interracial. So I guess what some may call the typical Jew is not so typical in today's world. There's quite a rainbow of people that are under the umbrella or submerged in the Jewish culture. That being said, as long as the actor is playing true to how the character is written, the writing is not offensive or stereotypical, I think it's fine. In some respects, the same argument could be made for productions of The Diary of Anne Frank. Should theaters only offer roles to Jewish actors for certain parts when the writing is not offensive or stereotypical? I think that's fine. I'm sorry, I read that. So I'm reading up the screen. Parts when they host auditions. How often would there be productions of this show if that were the case? It's an important part of Jewish history that needs to be told. And it's important that not just those of us submerged in the culture tell it. you know, then that would mean Jewish actors couldn't play Christians.
Right. Yeah. And that's where, for me, landing on this conversation, physical elements are one thing. If someone walks in and they're supposed to be playing an Asian role, then you can immediately tell as a casting director that person is Caucasian, not Asian, right? And with that, it's cultural appropriation to change someone's appearance to appear that way. But when it comes to things that aren't obvious, and as she says, Jewish people look all sorts of different ways. You can't tell by looking at someone what faith they are, then yeah, as long as they treat that with respect. And I think we're really getting on a dangerous path if casting directors start asking, what is your faith? What is
Yep.
your sexual orientation? Like, that's not their business to know that.
Yeah.
I think we need to give more voice to people of, different religions and different orientations and so forth. But that's separate from casting someone who's that, because you don't want to pigeonhole those actors to only play those roles for the rest of their lives.
Well said. Well said, Ellen. I think to have a litmus test like that is, as you said, it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Very dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. Susie says, I am such a traditionalist, something I'm working to overcome. Also a much different generation than many in the theater these days. I once was small and cute, so well into my 20s, directors only saw me as Maria and not Anita. If young actors can bring the director's vision to life, I say go for it. Historically, I tend to go for traditional casting. We had an African-American play Cliff in Cabaret, and it never worked because the SS would never have interacted with him in reality. Hard choices are being made for what was once cut and dry. And I see that point. I think, there's the term color conscious casting that's used now, where it used to be color blind casting. And the difference is, being like, there's a reason why you're casting a certain role a certain way, as opposed to just saying anybody can play any role. And I think, even though you want to provide opportunities, you do have to be careful about the script you're doing, because having Cliff played by a Black man is distracting, because historically that would completely change that character in that time.
Yeah. Well, point well taken. And the way she expressed herself. Elisa says, I think it's time for us white, cisgendered, able-bodied, privileged people to stop answering this question and start listening to those who have lived these issues. By the way, I didn't know Rachel Brosnahan wasn't Jewish. And I, a Jewish woman, named my cat after Mrs. Maisel. So I guess that's okay. I think the issue here is much more about how Jews are represented as opposed to who's representing them. Call out and stop the trend of the unflattering, stereotyped characters. And that's a whole nother area to be addressed.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of more on the shoulders of the director, the writer, producer, to make sure that the story being told is accurate. And the actor has to do the work too, obviously, if they're not of that, religion or whatnot. But yeah, it goes beyond just the actor playing it. You got to make sure the story itself and the character is not just a stereotype.
Right.
Yeah. So this is interesting because the next two people started responding. And so that we had this great conversation on the page. Shay said, it's honestly something I think about a lot as an actually Jewish person who doesn't exactly look Jewish. Like, there is definitely so much to be said for good representation, and I would love for as many Jews as possible to be played by actual Jews. But it also hits on me on a personal level, because I want to be playing those roles too. And where is the meter placed for who gets chosen for them? Because if I walk into a casting room for a play about Jewish people, I have to usually make it really explicitly clear that I'm here because I'm also Jewish, because many folks, fellow Jews included, just assume I'm not unless told otherwise. And I also stress a lot about what it looks like to see my very Irish name in a program in a play about Jewish people, and who are in the audience might assume I'm taking a role from a real Jewish person. But that also has a lot to do with my angst surrounding what the standard social markers are for who reads as Jewish, which are things I have problems with anyway, both from intracommunal hospitality lens and also from an anti-Semitism lens. So it's a much larger conversation. So I definitely want to have the confidence that my people are being well represented in theater and film by our own, but knowing that I am not often read to be part of that our own, even though I am in a much more personal level added complication that has a lot to overlap with my career and how I try to make use of what jobs I pursue.
Man, Ellen, we did open the door.
Yeah, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then Rachel responded to this. And, if you haven't been to the page, if you're if you're a podcast listener and you have the opportunity, jump on the Everything Theater page where you can interact with others of similar love of theater and follow some of these threads. Rachel says, I think this is where Jewish casting gets complicated, as it's both a culture and a religion. So although your devotion to the religion may be deeper than that of another Jewish actor, you may not lose roles for being too ethnic. But this is just an example and not meant as a judgment of any kind. I'll also note that I've not seen individuals who are Jews by choice being cast in many Jewish roles either, like Elizabeth Banks, for instance. It's a complicated issue, and I don't think there's an answer, but it is something worth thinking about. On a personal level, it really meant a lot to me that I was cast in Anne Frank a few years ago, and do notice when I see a production of Fiddler on the Roof with no Jews. I do think it goes further, is that if there is an historical figure who happens to be Jewish, and the Jewishness of that individual is really part of who that person is, consider casting someone who is of that culture, ethnicity, religion in the role.
Yeah.
Let's jump down to Jennifer.
Yeah, Jennifer. So yeah, this is a really great one, this because a different side of this. As far as hearing or able-bodied actors playing deaf or disabled characters, I can speak on that. I'm deaf and disabled, and having people play our roles or pretend to be these things without the lived experience is insulting and is cultural appropriation, especially when it comes to deaf characters. ASL, American Sign Language, is a language of a culture and community, and watching people badly sign or speak with some inappropriate voice is incredibly insulting. This kind of cultural appropriation is the same as using blackface or appropriating African Americans or Asians, etc. If you wouldn't do that, which I hope you wouldn't, absolutely do not even audition for these roles. Pass on them. The deaf, deafblind, and disabled communities will come after you, the project, the producers, the casting, and so forth. But unfortunately, the actor who accepts the role will get the brunt of it. Projects I've seen and our community have seen of hearing or able-bodied actors doing this are never remotely close to correct or authentic and perpetuate horrible stereotypes that I, for one, experience every day in my life. Tell them to find an authentically deaf, blind, disabled actor for the role and tell them it's akin to blackface and see if they'd cast a white person in a role of a black person. They wouldn't. Enough is enough of putting on the mask of deafness or disability and taking roles that would be best played authentically by someone who has any of these things. Representation matters, and perpetuating the stereotypes we have to live with every day is damaging, wrong, and inappropriate. We cannot take off our deafness at the end of the day. Disabled folks can't magically get up and get out of their wheelchair at the end of the day. The crutches or canes don't go into the prop closet. And if you have to get someone to teach you a language like ASL and they're a hearing person, you'll learn it incorrectly and be a laughingstock. And both you and the teacher will have to then will then have taken 2 jobs from folks more qualified to do so. I've written articles about this, and she, talks about all the things she's done.
Ellen, I'm going to jump in for a second. Maybe on that score, I'll say damage was done many years ago when Patty Duke was cast to play Helen Keller and won an Academy Award for it.
Right.
The industry not only approved, but celebrated.
And that's still a trend, right? We see actors all the time celebrated for playing disabled people, yeah.
And we've got, you mentioned at the top of our podcast that we've got a little something extra coming up in just a couple moments. And one of the folks we interviewed is a physically challenged actor who raised this very question.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I said, well, maybe we'll address this. I think in a program upcoming, I think we've got to really take a look at and have this a deeper conversation.
Yeah, because one thing, I'm curious about is, I've done Wait Until Dark twice in my life where I've played a blind person,
Yeah.
and tried to play it as authentically as I can as a seeing person. And a lot of companies do that play. It's a fantastic play. In your average community theater, how many blind actors do you have? So my question is, if you are a company that has the resources and the money and the time to find actors that fit that role and are talented enough to play that role, who are of that ability, that's one thing. If you're a community theater, does that mean you don't do those shows because you don't have the resources to find someone who is authentically blind, deaf, and so forth?
This is an area that it's like a black hole. It keeps going.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the more we become aware, the more depth to it. But the key is being aware.
Mm-hmm.
When Park Stage Company did In the Heights a few summers ago, I think it was the last show before the world closed down. Most of the actors cast were of the appropriate ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Not all, most. And there was a conscious effort,
Mm-hmm.
concerted, I should say, effort to do that.
Yeah. And I think there too is another interesting topic to bring up. If someone passes as something, does that change the conversation? I know there was a production of In the Heights in Chicago that got very criticized because they cast an Italian man as the lead, but
Yeah.
he passed as looking Puerto Rican,
But what does past mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That again goes into cultural appropriation. This is a thorny issue.
It very, very much is.
And I hope it stays uncomfortable until we settle. Well, we find a way to be appropriate, correct, hit the mark.
Yeah.
But if we get comfortable now, then we close the door on growth, I think.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it goes to, the big conversation we've been having about making sure people of color are represented in theater. And it's not just choose a play by a Black, actor for our season. It's about giving people of color leadership roles and letting them have a voice that is heard in that theater. But it's not just race, it's people of different abilities, people of different backgrounds, like making, a board of a company look.
It's our community. It
Mm-hmm.
should look like our community is really the essence of this. And this is the battle in many ways going on around the country right now.
Yes.
And the microcosm is theater. I think the two of us could go wax eloquently on that, and we shall not. But yeah, so thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and propelling this conversation forward. And what's funny, Ellen, is that what really triggered this was the Ben Platt controversy.
Right.
Playing, the role because, he's too old now, and why did you give it to him? And that really, in this conversation, wasn't germane, outside of making kids feel bad about, creating a persona of who you're not. Which is
an interesting point. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's true. You look at all the girls and Mean Girls, and you're like, I'm supposed to look like that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the answer is, some people think you should, which is horrible.
Oh,
and it's
right.
the sexualization of young girls.
And it's the casting directors who need to start casting wider range of people.
Yeah. So we're back to, we'll go find ourselves another casting director. We've done this before.
That's
Anyway,
right. But I also wanted to just say to our listeners, thank you also for being very eloquent and respectful in your responses. You know, some people didn't agree with each other, but everybody made it a very open conversation. No one was attacked. And I really appreciate that because I know this is a very sensitive subject.
Yeah, very much so. So thank you. And we'll keep the conversation going. And again, visit our webpage, our Facebook page. Oh, maybe we need a website. Visit our Facebook page, you know, and if there's something that you'd like us to broach, please let us know, you know. Mm-hmm. We're okay, but we're not perfect.
No, yeah. We're just two girls, two chicks chatting theater.
And we had a chance to talk to two other folks in the 518 who are doing their part to get theater back and financially viable. So we're going to jump into that conversation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. And this is a really exciting segment of the show today because there's a lot of exciting things happening in local theater. And we have two very special guests who are doing their best to help promote our local theater.
And that's really key. Promote, raise funds for, you know, with doors closed for as long as they were, you know, making sure that everybody's viable. So we've got Andy O'Rourke with us. I said, Andy, so how do you want to be identified? He said, college student, actor, volunteer, and that's, you know, for the community. And that's a big part of this. Also, we've got with us Carol Durant. She's an actor and a poet and a playwright and an author, and she jokes, she's the maven on all of this great stuff. You see, whatever you say, you know, we use. And they're partnering on a project to, you're selling stuff to make money for a good cause. Jump in, Andy. You want to get us started on this?
So I came to Carol about 2.5 weeks ago. Remind me, Carol, it's called the 518 Theater Art Campaign to keep our doors alive. Because why I started theater, shout out to Glen Clark High School, Pam Granger, for getting me involved on that stage. She met me in the hallway and she goes, "You're going to be a stage boy for our show." And I go, "No, there's no way. I'm not a theater person." And now, 3 years later, I'm at SUNY Empire State College for their first class in performing arts. I'm getting my bachelor's degree because I want to open my own theater for people with all abilities. And theater has changed my life so much. Shout out to Emily Murphy up at the Charles Arwood Theater, Chris at the park. I'm just
and I'm going to jump in, Andy, because a lot of folks may not be familiar with the Park Theater. As memory serves, it was a bank, wasn't it, at one time? That was
I have no idea.
Right. It's a beautiful space. I had the good fortune, along with Jerry Gretzinger, to perform there. We were one of the first acts when they opened. The restaurant hadn't even opened. And if people have not gotten up to Glens Falls to see and spend some time,
it is great. It's very
Park Theater.
nostalgic, beautiful.
Yeah. So let me just jump ahead. And Carol, I'm going to bring you in the conversation now. So Andy, what comes to you with an idea to tell us about selling stuff, raising money? How's this working?
So he was going to stay local and just focus on Warren County. And then he said, I want to expand it. And Carol, I draft you to be part of the team. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So we went to customink.com. We were shouting out to them, which is a fundraising platform, and came up with a logo design that we both loved. And there's a hoodie for $35, t-shirts for $25, plus of course tax and shipping. And how you can promote your favorite theater company or organization is buy a t-shirt or a hoodie, nominate your favorite organization, and the people with the most votes will indeed get the money. We're going with the top 3. So we have our first week of nominees that we have posted, and we're going to post all the nominees and just keep this going until the end of December. So We want everybody who we know who are on stage and taking naps right now and keeping their lines and lights and sound and everything going, because, you know, you got to be on stage to make it happen as well as online. But soon as you guys are able, please send your board of directors and your audience supporters
Yes, all
to
your
buy
family,
t-shirts.
friends.
So I
Right.
have a question here. So let's say I really like the hoodie and I write the check for $35. And I write it and I say that I'm also casting a vote. This purchase goes to, let's just say, the Park Theater, correct? So then in the end, whoever got the most I bought it for, they win. Do they get all the money? How are you spending the money?
We're going to do the top three. So the top three vote getters are we're going to split the money up in thirds. Now, if, you know, again, if there's a run on all of the merchandise and we get thousands of dollars, then of course, we would love to expand from the top three to, you know, as we discussed it, we're trying to get this to be so great that we can
So
expand.
successful, so
Right.
we can bring theater back, because it's really hurting my life, it's hurting Carol's life. And just to plug our recipients for this week, can we shout them out on the podcast?
Yeah.
So we got the Charles Arwood Theater, the lovely executive director, Emily Murphy. Carol, you want to give the next one?
We have the Rep, the Park Theater, the Strand. Did I forget anybody, Andy?
Yes. Adirondack Theater Festival, Marion and Tracy, lovely people. And we also have the Capitol Repertory Theater.
And if
Wonderful.
somebody is listening and, you know, their theater isn't part of this, can they join now or?
Yes, they can nominate in the comments, and then me and Carol have a spreadsheet going, because we want any theater in the 518, no matter how big you are, we want to see you on that list.
Nice.
Absolutely.
And I think,
Well,
you know,
absolutely.
something to reiterate too, because, you know, some people may be listening and say, well, but theater's back, right? Theaters, you know, a lot of shows opened, but, you know, I've been talking to a lot of theater owners and they say ticket sales are slow
Very
because
low.
people are
Right.
still apprehensive. Theaters are still struggling, even though doors are opening.
Yes,
Yeah.
because my background, I am a volunteer at the Wood Theater and the Park, and our ticket sales are so low. We barely have the house filled on some nights, and it's so sad. And this is why I came to Carol and I came to the 518 theater community, because I wanted to make a difference.
And
Well,
put the fun back in fundraising, because again, the normal fundraisers that all of the theaters would have done during their season were completely derailed and impacted. So Andy came up with this solution and we wanted to get together, and we did, and we're trying to make it happen and make sure that everyone knows that there's fundraising support coming out of left field.
Well, bravo. Of course, we've had an opportunity as we're talking to take a look at the designs, the logos, and hey, listen, it's time to do some holiday shopping. So this is a great way to do that. Carol Durant, Angie O'Rourke, thank you so very much. Bravo, hats off, take a bow for what you're doing. And then you got to let us know when it all wraps up, who came out on top. And what
absolutely. Thank you so much, Ellen, Benita, and everybody for Everything Theater Podcast. See you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll be right back. Love the energy of that project.
It's amazing. I mean, to take that initiative and make a difference. I mean, that's what he said. He wants to make a difference, and he is.
Yeah, and listen, theater peeps, it's a great holiday gift. For you or for somebody else, okay? And we, you know, twofold, you keep warm and you do good. Just a quick reminder that we have begun sponsorship for the Green Room, we're calling it. And if you've got an upcoming event, show, project that you would like to see here, okay, well, let's call it a commercial, but let us know. And the person's going to be hitting real soon. Just reach out to us on our Facebook page so we can have that convo, as the kids say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to promote you. Let us promote you.
And break a leg to everybody who is opening now, and continued good runs to those who've already opened. Keep the cards and letters coming, kids. And Ellen, I think we know what we're going to talk about next week. So look on the Facebook page and we'll have the question posted there. Again, thanks everybody for joining in. Ellen said it so eloquently. You know, not only did you share thoughtful, germane comments, but respectful, kind.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time. It's everything, everything, everything.